In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use the Hue Shift node to move our legs into the correct color space for our scene. So here's where we left off, and you can open up 20_color matte sign CC end. So we have color corrected our sign, so let's just call this sign CC, just so we can refer back to it if we ever need to. And let's now add in another color correct node. Now, as we can see here, I really prefer this material here to be about the same as this material. This is kind of like a off-white sort of metal covering. We can see it's knocked away in certain places. And so this is kind of the look I'm trying to go for. So obviously this blue here is not matching with our background footage. So what we can do now is go to our color correction tools and let's drop in a Hue Shift. This is the node I prefer using if I need to do a pretty large change in hue. So let's just zoom out here a little and let's move all of our stuff down so we can have a little bit more room to work. So the Hue Shift is going to let us change our hue. We can do that using this Hue Rotation slider right here. So as we move this, we can see the entire hue is changing. Now, of course, we need to set our mask. So let's set our mask to the sign matte.legs. And so now we're just affecting our legs. So we want to match this to this here. So we need to pull this pretty far, almost 180 hue rotation, to get it even in the same close color space as this. Now we can also edit the saturation and brightness here, but really I prefer doing that in a color correct node because the tools here are pretty simplistic. The saturation will work for you, but we don't have a lot of brightness controls here. So we can just use the hue rotation to shift our hue more towards the orange and yellow spectrum. And now let's just press C, drop in a color correct node, and let's jump to our ranges. And again, set it to our sign matte.legs. And here we can again change the saturation, maybe bump the gain up a little bit, maybe bump the gamma up to give it a little bit nicer. Maybe bump the contrast down just a little bit. We want to bump the saturation up whenever we change the contrast. So we were trying to get this whiter color, so we actually probably want to desaturate this a little bit more. And let's gain it up just to pull it a little bit brighter. Now it doesn't need to be this bright, it can be a little bit darker. And this actually looks like we're getting pretty close. It's still slightly more saturated than I prefer it to be. So let's pull the saturation down a little bit. Okay, so this is looking much nicer. Saturation is kind of a difficult thing to match because we don't have any really pure numerical things to compare against, so we're kind of having to go off of our own eyes. And since this is surrounded by the ground and by the different colored sidewalk, we're kind of having to guess a little bit haphazardly here. So always remember to zoom out and take a look at the whole composition. We can always get a little bit too close to the specific area, but we always have to look at it as a whole. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. So we use the Hue Shift to change our hue from a blue to more of a green or a orangish yellow. Then we use the color correct to decontrast it a little bit, increase the saturation a tiny bit, and use gamma and gain to make it a tiny bit brighter. And so now this is looking like it's matching that material much more closely. Okay, so I think the legs are looking pretty good. So in the next lesson, we'll begin working on the base here.